Yes, my name is Chris Abdey, and I am a procrastination coach. So I help people that are stuck in their life, and maybe they can't seem to move forward on things. Whether that's the laundry, raking the leaves, picking up your dog, his business when you walk in the park, to maybe you just haven't made the right move in your business, or maybe you're afraid to go after that big promotion, you've been putting that off. So I help people deal with those situations, and really help them move forward in their life to get to where they want to be. A big part of that is actually emotional resilience, because if we're not emotionally resilient, then um, we aren't strong enough to carry through those actions, because we head into emotional avoidance. So rather than deal with the uncomfortable emotions, meaning we're emotionally resilient, we go away from it to be comfortable. I would define emotional resilience as being capable of regulating your emotions and feeling your emotions. So, understanding your emotions and accepting your emotions are two very different things. And the acceptance and the understanding together are what would lead to emotional resilience. Emotional resilience is a key component to any healing journey, because you need to be able to sit with your emotions to fully feel. I mean, I'm sure that we've all, had these times when we've bottled emotions up. And the problem is that when you sweep things under the rug, eventually there's a big bulge in the rug, and maybe it starts to stink because you've got some extra stuff under there. And maybe a family of rats moves in, and it just becomes messy. So emotional resilience is really important, because if you don't unpack your emotions and are, comfortable with them, it's just going to come out later in a very, very, very bad way. I think the biggest misconception that people have with emotional resilience is that you can't cry, you can't scream, you can't, throw things or break things. I don't recommend that, but I mean, those are all perfectly viable actions that you can take in emotional resilience. And just because someone's crying doesn't mean they're not emotionally resilient. Just because somebody is screaming up at the sky, at 3 o'clock in the morning, because they're trying to work things out, doesn't mean they're not, you know, emotionally resilient. Some of the ways that you can strengthen your emotional resilience, it's actually very simple. I'll give you one tip that you can use to really start strengthening your emotional resistance. And I've had people tell me that they're amazed at how well it works, because it doesn't seem to require a lot of effort, but there actually is a lot of stuff going on in the background. It's just that we're not really noticing it. So the key to really becoming emotionally resilient is to sit with your feelings. When you start to feel something, don't bottle it up. Don't judge it. Don't try to rationalize it away. Just, if you're able to, just sit there and feel the feeling without judging it, without judging it, without trying to rationalize it, without trying to justify it, even, or even call it a name. Some people immediately, when they start feeling something, they immediately get out of the feeling and they get into their own heads. They're like, what am I feeling? Oh, I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling sad because Joey did this. Or I'm feeling sad because, my mom wouldn't let me have the cookie, or, whatever the case may be. But if you're stuck in your head, you're not processing the feeling. So while you've talked through it, you know, 10 years down the line, when Susie brings out a plate of cookies for you, you may go back to that, and you may have that feeling that from that time when your mother didn't give you that cookie, right? So we need to sit with the feeling. We need to let it flow through. That's what many people don't understand about emotional resilience, and how to process that, is that we've gotten so great at talk therapy that nobody knows how to feel anything. Mindfulness and self-awareness play a big role in emotional resilience, because we need to be aware of our triggers, and we need to be aware of things that we're feeling, and why we're feeling them. So, and again, mindfulness really helps as well, because when you are in a state of emotion, emotions tend to last about 90 seconds. So, if you're in a situation where you want to learn how to regulate and you really want to be in control of yourself, when you start to feel that, intense fear, anger, sadness, anxiety, whatever the feeling is, if you can bring yourself to the present moment and again just process the feeling of what that feeling is, you'll find that it will be, the emotion will be gone in 90 seconds and you'll just be able to continue on. It's only when we put our focus on it and when we add fuel to the fire, so to speak, that those emotions can carry on for hours. So really mindfulness, if you can bring yourself back to the present moment and actually have a quick hack for this. You can kind of bring yourself back and regulate within about 30 seconds. And if you want to try this, you can try it with yourself as well. So what you want to do is you want to pinch your two fingers together like this. And then what you want to do is you want to start rubbing them slowly together. And now as you're doing that, you need to close your eyes. And then you need to focus on the feeling of your fingertips. Actually feel each individual ridge of the fingertip and then actually visualize the depth of the fingertip as well. And you'll notice that as you start doing that, the emotions are going to slowly subside. And if you do that again, it takes anywhere between 5 and 30 seconds. It's just a very quick sort of mental reset. Boundaries are super important when it comes to emotional well being. I can't stress that enough because I had this issue myself. I was never really great at boundaries when I was younger, huge people pleaser. So, boundaries are so important because if you have no boundaries, giver's going to give and taker's going to take. Um, and if you give and give and give and give and give until you're done, I mean, you can't give anymore, right? So you need those boundaries to be able to actually do the things you want to do and, help others if that's what you want to do as well. Setting boundaries can be a little bit difficult, especially in the beginning. As I mentioned, I had difficulty with that as well. There's one simple one though, and actually, I love going back to to Avicii's levels. You know, if you've seen that music video, he starts out dancing in an office. He's getting yelled at by his boss or something, and he just starts like flipping out, and he's just writing the one word over and over again, no. you know, and that's where boundaries really begin. Is just saying no. Now, I'm not saying grab a magic marker and write over the person's face that you're looking at when you say it, but you know, the no is such a powerful thing, and it's not because we don't want to do it. It's that because we recognize that if we do, maybe we're not going to do a good job, or otherwise. So don't be afraid to say no, because what's the worst thing that's going to happen? The worst thing that's going to happen if you say no and somebody's really taking advantage of you and they don't care about you for any other reason, they're going to be out of your life because they were only there to take advantage of you. If you say no to somebody who does care about you, then they're going to respect that and they're going to stay in your life. And it is the easiest way to kind of start setting those boundaries. Um, and just blocking out your calendar, turning off your phone at 10 p.m., staying off social media, protecting your mental space. An interesting way to actually start setting boundaries too is to, um, you know, when you're planning things, plan time for yourself and stick to it. Setbacks are disappointing. Setbacks can be painful. I've had a few really big setbacks in my life. The important thing to remember about setbacks is that they aren't permanent. Much like success isn't permanent. So, you really have to learn to roll with the punches. And again, the setback doesn't define who you are. And I like to say like the fail acronym. So yes, fail is a word, but I believe fail is also an acronym. And it is first attempt in learning. And so setbacks are actually just setting you up to be launched forward. Like a slingshot, you set back and you spring shot forward. I would say that it's not a bad thing to start over. I mean, realistically, we can start over every single day. All it takes to really start over, quote unquote, start over, is to just change one thing, make a small change, one small thing. It doesn't need to be a huge, big thing. If you feel like in your life that you're constantly starting over, then you might want to look at why that is, because if you feel like you're constantly starting over and nothing's really clicking, I would be suspicious that maybe you were doing something that wasn't aligned with one of your core values, and you're self sabotaging to make sure that you're not doing that. There are quite a few different techniques for emotionally difficult times. Again, you need to know what kind of person you are. So if you are an auditory person, listening to music can help. However, I will say that, if you're sad, the tendency to want to listen to sad music is high. If you're angry, you want to hear about, I don't know, something that's really angry sounding. Um, I would recommend, and that there's a lot of research on this. I won't go into it, but if you want to kind of bring up your emotional state, you'll want to be looking for music, and there's music in all kinds, right? Somewhere in the 400 hertz range and above. 585 hertz is really popular. There's house music, there's techno music, there's rock music, there's classical music that's been like that. So if you're an auditory person, then that can really help to bring you back up. Close your eyes and listen to it for a little while. If you're a visual person, you might want something that's calming. And again, you want something that's calming to you. Not everybody's the same, but a general rule of thumb is something like like a waterfall or a nature scene, sunshine, something that's bright colors, blues, purples, golds in particular, because gold is more representative of resilience, and they use it a lot too. Knowledge as well. And if you're a tactile person, then maybe a weighted blanket or a stuffed animal would really help. But again, knowing yourself is crucial, because if you're a visual person and you're sitting there listening to music, you're probably going to be frustrated. The music isn't helping you calm down. Much like if you're an auditory person, you're just staring at a waterfall. You're like, this making me need to go to the bathroom. It's not really making me, helping me do anything, right? And definitely, if you're not a tactile person, that blanket is going to be suffocating. So just know that you need to know yourself, and what soothes you, and just be ready to be able to again, not only do that, but be able to sit with the feeling and let it process. The biggest one was I was a high functioning alcoholic, and the biggest emotional pain actually was when I was running with my daughter, and she was about, I guess, maybe a year and a half years old, maybe 2 years, maximum 2 years, and was running down the hall with her after I'd had probably about half a liter of rum, and you know, obviously not a great idea. And I was running and I was carrying her, and I started to fall. And in my infinite, I still don't know how, and I'm grateful that it did happen this way. But as I was running, I managed to turn, and as I was falling, I managed to get it so that she landed on me instead of, her head hitting the wall, which is where my head, hit the wall, broke my glasses. It was a whole big thing. I wasn't really hurt, but the emotional hurt was more like, you know, I could have really seriously hurt my daughter, right? And the breakthrough was that I can't keep doing this. I just can't. So that led to probably one of the biggest breakthroughs for sure, which was me getting off that, and starting to turn things around. Vulnerability is a powerful part of resilience, because if you're not vulnerable, then you can't really truly connect with another person, um, because you're always shielded. You're always separated, because that's the whole point of vulnerability is having that conduit between the two people, right, or between whoever. But it is a powerful part of healing, because you have to be able to look at the things that are uncomfortable, and if you're not vulnerable, you really can't do that, because you just stonewall. You cross your arms and you just say, "Yeah, it happened. So what?" It's just, again, it's like sweeping it under the rug, right? In the short term, you're gonna have a cleaner looking room. Long term, you're gonna have a big hump in the middle of the room, and it's gonna be ugly. So a supportive environment really would look like having, friends, family, coworkers, um, even a dog, cat, someone, something, when I reference the dog or the cat, that you can actually talk to and be vulnerable with, and have them as a support group. People won't necessarily, fix whatever's causing your emotional issues, but they'll be there to support you, and they'll be there to, listen, and um, at least hold space for you. That's what it really looks like, the holding of space. I love this one because when I was younger and I almost drowned, I developed a bit of a rescuer syndrome, but also a kind of a screw you syndrome. I'll do it myself if you're gonna let me die. um, and it is difficult to ask for help. It was difficult for me to ask for help for a long time. I had to start small. So, and it sounds silly. It sounds silly, but it will work, and it will help you to make that next step. So, you know how in sales, they always say get the little yes, because the little yeses lead to big yeses. So, seriously, in order to start asking people for help, just think of something small. And you don't even necessarily need it, but just be out in public, and just be like, hey, can I borrow that pen? Something small and dumb, right? But do it. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you get doing it. And then the more you'll be comfortable for asking for those bigger things later. Self compassion is paramount in the healing process, and I think it's a non negotiable, because you really need to understand yourself, and you really need to have grace for yourself that, whatever happened, it happened, but you need to understand that, you did the best that you could with, the information you had at the time, and that's the best that anybody can do. And if you don't have compassion for yourself, then you're just going to stand there beating yourself up, and it's like, beating a dead horse. It's dead. Why do you keep beating it? It doesn't serve any purpose, but it's, nasty, smelly, and painful in the end. Well, I would just go back to what I was saying before. Just understand that everybody does the best that they can with the information they have on hand at the time. And that is such a big thing. And I know people have a hard time thinking about that sometimes, but I give the example of doctors. You know, you more or less, you trust a doctor more or less, right? When you go to them for help. And the thing is that back in the 1950s, all doctors smoked Camels. Cigarettes were quote unquote healthy. Then 1960, 1970ish rolls around. They're like, okay, cigarettes definitely aren't healthy, but they're not going to kill you. And then 1990 comes around, and they're like, or no, I'm sorry, 1980 to early 1990 comes around. They're like, we might be giving you cancer. And then 1990 and above, they slapped a sticker on and said, my bad, bro. Yeah, we're giving you cancer. So the doctors did the best that they could with the information they had at the time, right? So if you can forgive them for that, then you can forgive yourself for whatever it is that happened. Because again, nobody sets out and says, I know this. I'm going to go out and do the absolute worst possible thing I can possibly imagine for myself using that information. Nobody does that. So that is the easiest way to give yourself some compassion. That the one thing I really want to leave everybody with is that, you're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. You can never be too much. If somebody says you're too much, that's a them problem. That's not a you problem. Um, and just remember that emotional resilience is not about, not crying. It's not about not screaming. Although there are, times and places where it may be less appropriate, but it doesn't mean you're broken and need fixing. It just means that, you have some programming that you need to take a look at, and programming can always be changed.